Hey readers, Echo here. This is a quick re-upload. I had some glitches in my previous video that some people told me about, and I decided to just reshoot quickly and do some better quality control on my editing. And anyways, I wasn't planning on shooting more videos past my bookshelf tour, and even that was meant to be me sharing what's on my shelves with a few people in a Discord server. Death is a Gang Boss, Orpheus is the booktuber, his server. And but I really did enjoy all of the nice comments and interactions with people on YouTube that was seemingly from all over the place, and I think maybe I will actually make some videos. I think this could be a fun way to be able to communicate about the things I care about, connect on books and authors that I care about, and maybe learn from you guys about writers and things that I don't know much about. So yeah, I'm planning on making a video on Jose Donoso. Probably be like a bit of a mixed thing. Currently reading House in the Country. I think The Obscene Bird of Night is a masterpiece that probably should be reread many times. These others I haven't gotten to, and there are some important ones that I don't own yet, but I'm researching it a little bit, and they'll probably be my next video, and it's probably no stopping it. But after that, I was thinking of maybe doing a video on John Hawkes, perhaps, or maybe Tom Mullen. You guys let me know if it's interesting, and maybe I'll skip it. But the Donoso is probably coming up as my next, and probably like my first serious piece of content. In the meantime, I'm putting up a little fluff video on some hauls, some ruminations on the book as object, and some literary memorabilia, which I feel like is an unexplored space. There's like I'll get back to it, but I do feel more and more that there isn't much material stuff that I care about, except for books and what's related to it. But starting with some hauls, some books I got since my tour. So first of all, got a couple of Sublunary edition books. And fittingly, it's stating right here, an object by Sublunary Editions. And that's something I've been thinking about more recently. That my books, the text is of course the important part, but the books are starting to have more of a value as objects to me as I grow older. And it might be just mere exposure, like it, but I do think that there is some emergent properties to a collection of books reaching a certain size, and I don't know what the number is, but at some point, I feel like if all of my books were just files on an e-reader, I would not have the same relation to them. An example is that someone was mentioning the other day that they were just halfway through The Loser by Bernard, and they said that halfway through this was probably turning out to be one of their favorite books. And I couldn't help but agree. I think that it's a wonderful book, but it's also one that I rarely talk about because I don't have a physical copy of it. I read that on my Remarkable tablet. A lot of the things I read on the e-reader, I just don't think about that much. When I stand here among my books and look at the spines and maybe pull a book out and sample a few lines, it's just gives me a different relationship to the book. But yes, as a digression, back to the Sublunary editions. This was very well described on Leaf by Leaf's channel, and like I said, Latin America always has me interested. So I'm looking forward to that. I had a couple of previous Sublunary editions. This one, I thought I also had Pierre Sange's Falstaff book, but maybe that's just a text I read. But and I also have the Bruno Schultz short story that was discovered recently and unpublished in his collected stories. But the reason why I made the order this time is really this book, Under the Sign of the Labyrinth, by Christina Tudor Sideri. I was just clicking through their webpage, and the title spoke to me and got me hooked straight away. But when I read this excerpt on the page, just these few lines: vain and cruel, I have become a self that contains all negations to come. I have escaped the universe of time and space, page after page, touch after touch, train after train. I have become the idea of a sea beast moving in the deep. I have become the labyrinth. I am entombed in poetry. In the first stanza, in the last, in the blueness of thirsting ink, in the bruising of eternity, I have become alone. I am alone. And I just remember reading that and thinking, wow. Parts of that I would, put on my tombstone. That is, it's beautiful. And just when you start this too, it just seems to have lived a lot and experienced a lot to be able to put this into words. To write of trauma is to walk a path that requires a certain setting provided by your memory as it struggles to preserve the self. Your memory possessing itself at the intersection of ruin and allegory. To write of trauma is to throw yourself against a wall with the strength of waves clashing against one another during the most tempestuous of nights. So yeah, this is something I am very excited about. It's a short 125 pages, and all of these Sublunary editions are quite short, but but they're beautifully done, and they have some real gems of the text within. I can recommend checking those out, and their webpage, if there's anything you find interesting there. And if you end up with some Sublunary editions, then please tell me about it. Next up, I picked up some Luigi Pirandello. Been on my radar. Of course, he's won the Nobel Prize in, I believe, 1934. Well-known playwright, but he wrote short stories and novels. But the reason why I picked him up is that I read Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana by Umberto Eco a couple of weeks ago. Longer probably at this point. But the Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana is about a seller of rare books that wakes up an amnesiac. He has perfect recall of all the books he's read, but he can't remember his wife or any of the events or persons in his life. But so in the first part of the book, it's very lovely to read, because a lot of it is just remembering things through literature, and he's talking about how everything seems to emerge as from a fog. And so in the beginning, since this is how he sees his world, he recalls a lot of texts with fog in them, and Pirandello is one of the one he quotes, and I thought, yeah, I should give him a go. And I am, like I mentioned, I'm drawn to the Latin American, but I'm also very drawn to the Italian. I feel like Umberto Eco, Italo Calvino, Giorgio Manganelli, Tommaso Landolfi. I feel like Lampedusa. I feel like all of these are also sort of, they cluster and group higher around the top of the list of authors I know, and it's sort of a coincidence that they come from the same country, maybe, but I feel like they outperform just if authors were randomly distributed across the world with no cultural context, which of course is a ludicrous idea, but I feel like Italy is also one of those places that outperform, in my book, how well these authors write. So, some Pirandello, excited for that. In my bookshelf tour, I show some pages from Voss, an opera in Flatland, which looks very interesting, and the prose is technical and scientific and very, very interesting to me. But I haven't looked into it more than sampling a few pages, because I haven't read Edwin Abbott's original Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions. And it's a short read. It was a seemingly interesting one, and sort of mathematical, like the whole idea of it is that the narrator is telling us of a world that exists in 2 dimensions, and I spent some time here explaining, how intuitive it is for us who exist in space, that that a lot of more objects will just appear as dots or lines because the information our visual system uses to make up a lot of these shapes, they just don't work in 2 dimensions. So they tell you early on that if you look at a penny from above, you'll see a circle, but put your head against the table you've placed a penny, and what you'll see will approach a straight line. So there's it's definitely original, and I do enjoy reading about mathematics and mathematical reasoning, even though it's not maybe one of my strong suits. It's a topic I enjoy, so excited about that. Also picked up 2 novels by Arno Schmidt. I said I skipped over Arno Schmidt in my bookshelf tour, saying, everyone, of course, knows Arno Schmidt, and that was a large part because, like I mentioned before, I thought the audience of my video was a certain Discord server where there is an impressive amount of people who have Arno Schmidt's giant book, Bottom's Dream. But a friend of mine pointed out that he hadn't heard of Arno Schmidt, and I think that's probably true for a lot of people. And don't think this is a good place to start necessarily. I hear maybe a school for atheists is a good starting point. What's interesting about, well, there's lots of things interesting about Schmidt, but as you can tell by the text, there's a lot of interesting punctuation, and there's an article explaining how to read Schmidt and his peculiarities, and this is magnified even more in Bottom's Dream, where you have the texts also appearing in columns where there's a simultaneity in multiple conversations and trains of thought. But it's very interesting. He's intelligent and is really trying to push the limits of what the written media is capable of, and but if you're interested in that sort of extreme writing, then maybe his short stories or A School for Atheists would be a better start. I haven't read this, of course, but it's definitely want to read more Schmidt. I've started and I continue to read Bottom's Dream, but it's sort of a slow process where I might do a page or two and put it back up and take some notes and come back to it. But it's it does everything well. It's amusing. There, the Bottom's Dream starts with a group of translators discussing translating Poe, and I feel like he does a good job of all aspects of that. He has intelligent things to say about Poe. He has convincing dialogue and a sort of exuberant energy that's it's engaging to read. So yeah, I think that Bottom's Dream is sort of, you know, a bit of a book that nobody expects you to finish. It's sort of like a difficult Finnegan's Wake type thing that it's going to quote unquote filter you as a reader. But I think that it's not really true with either. I think that it's about, if you have the time and you pace yourself and you read this, you'll find it to be quite a pleasant experience. It's just not something to give up on. Also finally got Glousterbook. It's the second book of the series, and the only one I've been missing. But yeah, I've tried order. This is the third time I order it, and finally I get the right book. The two previous times I got the Gloucester Guide, which seems nice enough, but not exactly what I'm interested in. Might actually be interesting to read along this, even though I do think that you'll see a lot of Gloucester in this. There is Johnathan Bayliss Foundation that has yearly, I don't know if it's yearly, but they do readings, and it is filmed and put on YouTube. So if Bayliss seems interesting, there is some material on him. From what I've sampled, I like what I see. It of course seems very very ambitious, but it's but I also just like the tone and what he's writing about, and just sort of it sort of seems like it's on the kind of wavelength I enjoy of fun but maybe slightly academic preoccupations. So I'm excited about that. So, last of the I picked up Zone by Matthias Enard, even though I do have Compass in the hardback, which I was planning on being my first Enard, but a good friend of mine recently read this and said that it was wonderful. He said that there were like lush hypnotic sentences that just go on, and that it was just beautifully written, and he said he would be down to read any Enard I wished. And another friend of mine has read it, mentioned that like this book has the perfect it's a perfect mix of philosophical musings and a detective novel, And like a lot of the praise I hear about this just sounds great. A modern Iliad it's quite the praise, and it's a solid 516 pages or so. Yeah, barely into the 17th. So that should be very exciting. Light by Ava Figes. It's she was born Ava Hunger. She had to escape Berlin during World War II, and she escaped to Britain, where she grew up, and became a novelist. And she sort of joined B.S. Johnson and Heppenstall, which I mentioned in my last video, and Anne Quinn, Stefan Temerson, maybe. Yeah, but that group of experimental writers, and just slowly try to accumulate more of those. And this is supposedly it's a nice and short book, so I can get the idea fairly quickly if I like her and I want to explore her more. But it's a book about the day in the life of an aging Claude Monet. I've seen some praise of the prose and the interesting shifting of perspectives. Sort of like an impressionistic painting in book form, which sounds lovely. So I'll let you guys know how it is. Yeah, and I already talked about the mysterious Flame of Queen Loana earlier. It's an interesting book. There's a lot of high quality color prints of things that Umberto is probably nostalgic about from his childhood. I feel like it has like this little slightly too long middle to end part where he gives us an interesting, he sort of through the radio and comics and books of his childhood, he sort of starts to remember things and gives us an idea of how it was growing up as a child during fascist Italy, which is, it's okay. It's not as strong as the first part though, and where it's sort of like Oliver Sacks meets Nedval's Sylvie, sort of like a triangle drama. Not a triangle even. There's 3 women who becomes a bit of a point of conflict for him. He has his wife, which he doesn't remember. He has the young assistant in his shop that is young and beautiful and interesting. And then he starts to remember bits and pieces of this first love as a young man. He tries to come to grips to what he feels about these different women, which is sort of interesting from the perspective of if you've forgotten everything about your wife, how do you, if you forget everything about your wife but you remember your high school love. What sort of inner turmoil and thoughts does that spawn? I wouldn't suggest this as the first Umberto Eco anyone reads. Read Name of the Rose and Foucault's Pendulum and Baudolino, and start there. And then if you're in love with him, then maybe go for the completist with this one. The books I want to talk about are these two from my wife, who is wonderful and supportive of my clearly unhealthy book buying habits. So shout outs to her. She got me a lovely signed copy of An Adultery, which I'm excited about. I feel like I'm still wrestling a bit about how I feel about Theroux, but what I do know is that Darkenville's Cat is beautifully written, and he is so talented with language. And lastly, I got myself a copy of Natalie Natalia. We see praise of some of his other books, but yeah, I think that Nicholas Mosley is very interesting. I think that once I finished the books in the Catastrophe Practice series, I'll do a little video on him as well. But yeah, got a signed copy, and that sort of brings us to what I wanted to very briefly discuss, and it's sort of literary memorabilia and signatures. Is not quite memorabilia, but it is like sort of a connection with the object and the author. Signed copies is not a big part of my collection, and it's not something that up until now I've spent much time investing in or chasing, but I do admit that it tickles me a little bit knowing that this book crossed hands with the author at one point, and it's an insignificant thing, and it's not something that I will chase, but maybe just a handful of those absolute favorite authors, I would be very happy to find some signed copies of, perhaps. So I do have a couple of examples of memorabilia that I would like to just very briefly show, and hopefully maybe based on this you guys can think of some examples that you have and drop them in the comments and tell me about it. But first, I have 2 pesos coin of Borges. It's not worth anything. You can buy them for, well, a couple of dollars maybe on eBay. But I carry it with me. I have it in my wallet. It's a bit of a talisman. It makes me stop and think about Borges more often than I would. Because right now I have to admit that I think that Borges is like in my top 3 of all time. But it's been years now since I actually read him, and I think it's I'm due for like a reread. But yeah, this is something that I pull out and you know, think about. It's a conversation starter with certain crowds. Uh, but yeah, it's what it is. And secondly, I have this memorial stamp of Tommaso Landolfi. I do not collect stamps, but I think that this is pretty neat. I got this nice little envelope with a little card in it, and I just use it as a bookmark in my copy of Words in Commotion. And it'll never get to anything more than that, but I do sort of appreciate that that something like this exists. Like Landolfi is not so well known outside of Italy, so maybe he's not the best example. I guess he is more known in Italy, and thus something like this can exist. But I think that it would be interesting for there to be more things like this. Like, do any of you know of like Julian Gracq bookmark, or you know, an Evandara necktie? I'm sure that at the level of like of Dickens and Hemingway, Austen, those, and you know, a lot of those big authors that have really survived the test of time, you'll find something. But yeah, if any of you know of anything neat like this, it would be lovely if you would share. And I think that it's not important. Like I said, once again, that's the text that is important. But I think a lot of us get to a point where books are such a big part of our lives that we want more things to remind us and point to back to books again. I do love having a collection. I do love being able to browse and sample. And often when I talk to people online about books, they'll mention something. I'll run straight to the shelf and pull it out if I have it, and read a couple of pages and run back to the conversation. It's lovely. But anyways, this has gone on for too long. Jose Donoso video in the works. Thinking of doing Hawks and Mosley in a while. If there's anything that's my tour or you see on my shelves that that would be interesting, maybe comment, and I can see if there's enough material for me to whip something up. Anyways, thanks for watching.